The night I refused Ethan Caldwell's $1 million contract, I did not know he was trying to save my diner from his own company. All I knew was that the most powerful man in Philadelphia had walked in 10 minutes before closing, carrying a black leather folder and the quiet certainty that everything in my life could be purchased. Rain tapped against the front windows of Bennett's diner, soft at first, then harder, turning the neon open sign into a trembling red reflection across the wet sidewalk. Inside, the coffee had been sitting too long. The last customer had left a few dollars beneath a chipped white mug. Behind the counter, our old refrigerator hummed like it was arguing with death. I was 28 years old, 6 months behind on the business loan, and counting a stack of bills that would not cover Friday's payroll. Then the bell above the door rang. I looked up and saw a man who did not belong beneath fluorescent lights. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him too perfectly to have come from any store I knew. Rain darkened the shoulders of his coat, but he did not appear bothered by it. He stood just inside the door, tall and composed. His dark hair brushed back from a face that looked calm only because it had practiced hiding everything else. 2 men waited outside beside a black sedan. They did not come in. They did not need to. The room changed simply because he had entered it. "The kitchen is closed," I said. His eyes moved from me to the rows of empty booths, then to the framed photographs covering the wall behind the register. Little league teams, birthday parties, my mother pouring coffee at 23, my grandfather cutting the ribbon on opening day in 1968. "I am not here to eat," he said. His voice was low and even, the kind that made people lean closer without realizing it. I set the money down. "Then you are here at a bad time." "Claire Bennett." "That depends on who is asking." He approached the counter and placed the folder in front of me. Gold initials were pressed into one corner. CDG, Caldwell Development Group. I knew those letters. Everyone on our block did. Over the past year, Caldwell had bought the laundromat, the pharmacy, Sal's shoe repair shop, and the apartment building across the street. One by one, my neighbors had taken the checks and packed their lives into boxes. Bennett's Diner was the last property standing between Caldwell Development and a 20-story luxury complex with private parking, rooftop gardens, and monthly rents higher than most people in the neighborhood earned. "Ethan Caldwell," he said. Of course he was. I had seen his photograph in the business section. 36 years old. Self-made. According to magazines that ignored the company he had inherited. Brilliant. According to people who profited when he entered a room. Ruthless. According to everyone who had ever been asked to move. I looked at the folder, but did not touch it. "Your people already called." "My people made an offer." "Your people made 6 offers." This one came from me. Lightning flashed beyond the windows. For one white second, the diner looked frozen in an old photograph. Then thunder rolled somewhere over the river. Ethan opened the folder and turned it toward me. The number printed on the first page made my breath stop. $1,200,000. Enough to clear every debt. Enough to give Aunt Maggie the retirement she deserved. Enough to let me sleep without waking at 3 in the morning to calculate interest in the dark. Ethan washed my face with the patience of a man who had seen that number defeat stronger people. "The property was appraised at less than half that," I said. "I am aware." "Then why offer so much?" "Because your signature is holding up a $200 million project." There it was. Not generosity. Arithmetic. I turned several pages. The language was clean and cold. 30 days to vacate. Fixtures included. Name rights transferred. Demolition permitted after closing. Bennett's Diner would not simply close. It would be erased so completely that one day people would walk past this corner and never know we had fed them here. Ethan removed a silver fountain pen from his coat and placed it beside the contract. "You can have an attorney review the full agreement in the morning. And if I say no?" "You have said no before." "I am saying it again." Something shifted in his expression. Not anger. Interest. It was as though refusal were a language he had heard about but never encountered in person. "You have not seriously considered the offer." "I considered it the moment your company started buying this block." "Sentiment does not pay debt, Ms. Bennett. Neither does regret." His gaze sharpened. Behind him, the neon sign flickered, red light sliding across one side of his face before disappearing. "Everyone has a number," he said. I thought of the payroll envelopes in the office. The cracked tile near the register. The medical bill Aunt Maggie kept pretending had been handled. Then I looked at the photograph of my mother behind the counter. She had raised me in this diner after my father left. She gave free meals to children whose parents were late getting home. She kept the lights on during winter blackouts. She once told me a business could be poor on paper and rich in every way that mattered. My hand stopped trembling. I picked up Ethan's expensive pen. For the first time that night, he almost smiled. He thought he had won. I lowered the tip to the contract and drew one dark line through the purchase price. Then, beneath it, I wrote 2 words in capital letters. Not for sale. The smile never reached his mouth. I capped the pen and pushed the folder back across the counter. You are turning down more money than this place will make in 20 years. Probably. Your roof needs replacing. I know. Your lender filed a notice of default, and the property records show 2 late tax payments. You investigated me. I investigate every property before I make an offer. Then you should have investigated the people inside it. Silence settled between us. The refrigerator clicked off. Rain filled the space it left behind. Ethan looked past me again, this time at the old photographs. His attention stopped on one near the bottom. My mother stood beside a young woman in a waitress uniform, both of them laughing behind the counter. The photograph had been taken before I was born. Ethan went completely still. It lasted less than a second, but I saw it. Recognition. Pain. Then it was gone. He closed the folder. You will reconsider. You sound very sure. I do not build my life around uncertainty. Maybe that is your problem. He studied me for a long moment, as though deciding whether I was brave, foolish, or simply too tired to understand what I had refused. Then he picked up the folder and turned toward the door. The bell rang when he opened it, letting in a blade of cold October air. Mr. Caldwell, I called. He looked back. I held up the fountain pen. You forgot something. His eyes moved from the pen to my face. Keep it. I do not accept expensive gifts from men trying to demolish my life. It is not a gift. What is it? His expression softened in a way that made him look more dangerous, not less, because for one brief moment, he looked human. Something to sign with when you change your mind. Then he stepped into the rain. One of the men outside opened the car door, and within seconds the black sedan disappeared down the empty street. I stood alone beneath the buzzing lights, holding a pen worth more than our cash register. I should have thrown it away. Instead, I placed it in the drawer beneath the counter and locked the diner for the night. At exactly 9:15 the next evening, the bell above the door rang again. Ethan Caldwell walked in alone, sat at booth 7, and ordered a cup of black coffee as though he had been coming there his entire life. The second night Ethan came into my diner, he did not bring a contract. He brought silence. It entered before him, settling over the counter, the stools, and the last 3 customers finishing their coffee beneath the tired red glow of the neon sign. He closed his umbrella and looked around as though he already knew where he was going. Booth 7 sat near the back window, beneath a framed photograph of the neighborhood parade from 1989. Ethan slid into the seat facing the door. No assistant. No attorney. No black leather folder. Just the same charcoal coat, the same controlled expression, and the kind of presence that made ordinary objects seem suddenly aware of themselves. I stayed behind the counter and pretended to wipe a surface that was already clean. We are closing in 45 minutes, I said. That should be enough time for coffee. There are 14 coffee shops within 6 blocks. I counted 12. I looked at him. Of course you did. Aunt Maggie appeared from the kitchen carrying a towel over one shoulder. Her silver-streaked hair was pinned up badly, which meant she had been working too long and was too tired to care. She followed my gaze toward booth 7. Is that him? She whispered. That is him. He looks expensive. He is trying to tear down the building. Maggie considered that. He still looks expensive. I told her to go home. She told me not to set anything on fire and left through the back door with one final suspicious glance at Ethan. I approached his booth with my order pad, even though I had memorized every item on the menu before I was tall enough to reach the register. What would you like? I asked. Black coffee. Is that all? His eyes moved to the glass dessert case near the counter. Apple pie. Heated. No, I wrote nothing down. Most people begin with hello. Most people sign my offer. And yet here you are, sitting in the only place that did not. Something almost moved behind his eyes, but he gave me no answer. I poured the coffee, cut a slice of pie, and placed both in front of him. He thanked me quietly. That surprised me more than it should have. Powerful men had sat in my booths before. Council members, developers, local television anchors. and even a retired quarterback who left no tip and asked for free pie because he believed recognition counted as payment. Most of them treated service like a form of invisibility. Ethan looked at me when he spoke. He noticed when I set down the mug. He moved his hand so I would not have to reach around him. Small things. Controlled things. I hated that I noticed them. He stayed until 9:52, drank the coffee, left the pie untouched, paid in cash, and walked out without mentioning the diner, the contract, or the 2 words I had written across his offer. The next night, he returned at 9:15. Booth 7. Black coffee. Cold apple pie. The night after that, the same. By the 5th evening, I stopped asking what he wanted. By the 7th, I had his cup waiting before the bell rang. I told myself it was efficiency, not expectation. That was a lie. His visits began to change the rhythm of the diner. Regular customers lowered their voices when he entered. Jerry Monroe, who had complained about the price of eggs every morning for 11 years, stopped complaining entirely whenever Ethan sat nearby. 2 college students asked whether he was a movie producer. Mrs. Donnelly decided he was either a politician or a widower. Those are very different things, I told her. Not always, she said. Ethan never brought anyone inside with him. The black sedan waited across the street each night, but the men inside remained behind the tinted windows. He sat alone, usually reading documents on his phone or staring through the glass at the rain-darkened block his company was trying to replace. He never touched the pie. Not once. On the 10th night, I carried the plate back to his booth and set it down harder than necessary. Is there something wrong with it? I asked. No, you order it every night. Yes. You never eat it. I am aware. Then stop wasting food. He lifted his eyes from the window. Add it to the bill. That is not the point. What is the point? People come here because they are hungry. I come here because I order something. That is not an answer. He leaned back against the cracked vinyl seat. The diner was empty except for us. Rain whispered against the windows, and somewhere in the kitchen, the ice machine dropped a tray of cubes with a sudden clatter. You ask a great many questions, he said. You spend a great many evenings in a place you want demolished. I told you. I am here for coffee. The coffee is terrible after 8. I know. The pie is better warm. I know that too. I folded my arms. Then what are you doing here? His gaze moved to the opposite side of the booth. The empty seat. For the first time since I had met him, his composure did not look like strength. It looked like effort. Are you planning to sit there until I surrender? I asked. No. Then what are you waiting for? He looked at the untouched pie, then back at the empty seat. Someone who is not coming back. The words were so quiet that I almost thought I had imagined them. I wanted to ask who. I wanted to ask why a man who could afford any restaurant in the city kept returning to a diner with a leaking roof and a stubborn owner. Instead, I picked up the coffee pot and filled his cup. That is not how waiting works, I said. I know. He stayed later than usual that night. After he left, I carried the untouched plate to the kitchen and stood over the trash can longer than I needed to. Something about throwing it away felt wrong. I wrapped the slice and placed it in the refrigerator, although I could not have explained why. Then I went back to clean booth 7. A quarter had rolled beneath the table. I crouched to reach it and noticed 2 letters carved into the underside of the wood. The marks were old, softened by years of polish and dust, but still readable. E.C. My fingers traced them before I could stop myself. The carving was low and uneven, the work of a child rather than a man. The next evening, Ethan arrived at 9:15. I did not bring coffee. I stood beside the booth and waited until he looked up. How long have your initials been under this table? I asked. Every trace of color left his face. His hand tightened around the edge of the menu. The reaction lasted only a second, but I saw it clearly. Not irritation. Not calculation. Fear. Then he stood so quickly that the table shook. Do not ask me that again, he said. He left without ordering and without looking back. Through the window, I watched him cross the sidewalk as the black sedan pulled forward to meet him. For the first time since Ethan Caldwell had entered my life, I did not feel like the one being studied. I felt as though I had found the door to a room inside him that had been locked for years. Somehow, my diner held the key. For 3 nights after Ethan walked out, booth 7 stayed empty, and I hated how often I looked at the door. At 9:15, my eyes lifted automatically whenever tires moved across the wet street. At 9:16, I told myself I was relieved. By 9:30, the diner felt strangely unfinished, as though someone had removed a chair from the room and left the silence behind. On the fourth night, the weather turned. The forecast had warned about heavy rain, but Philadelphia's storms had a way of arriving with more anger than promised. Wind pressed against the windows. Water rushed along the curb in silver sheets. The neon sign flickered so badly that the word open kept becoming PN, which Aunt Maggie said was fitting because I had always been stubborn enough to run a business with an important part missing. By 8 o'clock, every booth was occupied. People had come inside to escape the weather, and no one seemed eager to leave. Mrs. Donnelly sat near the counter with her usual tea. Jerry Monroe argued with the radio about the Phillies. A young mother named Rachel tried to keep her 6-year-old son, Caleb, entertained with sugar packets while they waited for bus service to resume. Walter Hayes, who had been eating dinner at Bennett since before I was born, occupied booth 4 with meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and a folded newspaper he had already read twice. At 9:15, the bell rang. Ethan stepped inside. Rain covered his coat, and his hair was damp for the first time since I had known him. No umbrella. No driver beside him. He looked toward booth 7, then at me. "Coffee?" I asked. It was the closest thing to forgiveness I was willing to offer. "Please." He sat down without mentioning the initials beneath the table. I poured his cup, but did not bring pie. If he noticed, he said nothing. Thunder rolled across the city. The lights dimmed once, twice. Then every bulb in the diner went dark. The refrigerator stopped humming. The radio cut off in the middle of Jerry's complaint. For half a second, there was complete silence. Then Caleb began to cry. "Nobody move," I said. My voice came out sharper than I intended, but it worked. Chairs stopped scraping. Conversations quieted. Aunt Maggie found the emergency flashlight beneath the register and handed it to me. I turned it on, but the beam was weak and yellow. "Candles are in the storage room," I told her. "Top shelf, next to the extra napkins." "I know where we keep things, Claire." "Then why do I keep finding salt in the sugar cabinet?" "This is not the time." Ethan had already taken out his phone. "I can have portable generators here within 15 minutes. I looked through the window. Traffic lights were dark in both directions. Cars moved at a crawl through water that was rising over their tires. "Nobody is getting here in 15 minutes. My people will." "Your people cannot control the weather." His jaw tightened, but before he could answer, a plate shattered near booth 4. Walter had tried to stand. One hand gripped the edge of the table. The other pressed against his chest. His breathing came in short, shallow pulls. "Walter." I crossed the room as quickly as I could without slipping. His face had gone pale. "My inhaler," he said. "Coat pocket." Jerry found the rescue inhaler, but Walter's hand shook too badly to use it. I knelt beside him and helped him take the medication. Slow breaths. "Look at me." "Not the storm." "Me." Ethan appeared beside the booth. "I am calling 911. "Do it," I said. "Tell them he is 72, conscious, and having trouble breathing. Tell them we are at Bennett's on Fairmount Avenue." His phone showed no signal. The diner's internet-based landline was dead too. He moved toward the front window, then the door, searching for a connection. Nothing. The certainty in his face cracked. "There is no service." "Then put the phone away and bring me the clean towels from behind the counter." He stared at me. "Now, Ethan." He moved. No argument. No delay. Aunt Maggie lit candles and placed them inside water glasses to keep the flames steady. Rachel held Caleb close. Jerry cleared the tables around Walter so he had room. I asked Ethan to hold the flashlight above my shoulder while I checked Walter's pulse and watched his breathing. His hand was steady. Then thunder struck so close that the windows rattled. Ethan flinched. Not slightly. His entire body locked. The flashlight beam jumped across the wall. I looked up. He was staring at the front door, but he did not seem to see the diner anymore. His breathing changed. Fast. Controlled, but barely. "Ethan," I said. No response. Another flash of lightning filled the room. His fingers tightened around the flashlight until his knuckles turned white. "Ethan, look at me." His eyes found mine. For the first time, there was no distance in them. No calculation. Only fear. "Keep the light steady," I said softly. "Walter needs you." The words reached him. His shoulders lowered by an inch. The beam returned to Walter's face. I focused on the older man until his breathing finally slowed. The medication had begun to work. Color returned to his cheeks. Someone near the front door finally caught enough signal to reach emergency services. About 10 minutes later, faint red lights appeared at the end of the block. Emergency medical workers reached us on foot from a vehicle stopped by flooding. They examined Walter and decided to take him to the hospital for observation. Before leaving, he squeezed my hand. "Your mother would be proud," he whispered. I watched until they disappeared into the rain. When I turned back, Ethan was sitting at booth 7. The flashlight rested on the table. His coffee had gone cold. "You froze," I said. He looked at the candle between us. "I dislike storms." That was more than dislike. "Do you always demand answers?" "Only when people keep showing up in my diner carrying secrets." He remained silent for so long that I thought he would leave again. Instead, he traced one finger along the rim of the cup. "When I was a child, my mother and I used to come here during storms." My breath caught. "Why?" "Because sometimes home was not safe for her." He said it without detail, but the weight of the sentence filled every empty space. "She worked nights here for a while. Your mother let me sit in this booth until closing. She gave me apple pie because it was the only thing I would eat." I thought of every untouched plate I had placed in front of him. Suddenly, none of them looked wasteful. Each one looked like a place setting for a ghost. "The initials," I said. "I carved them with a butter knife when I was 8. Your mother caught me. She made me scrub every table in the diner as punishment." A faint smile touched his face, then vanished. "What happened to your mother?" His eyes stayed on the candle. "She left this city. I never saw her again." Before I could ask anything more, Aunt Maggie called from behind the counter. She had pulled an old metal box from the cabinet beneath the register while searching for spare batteries. Photographs spilled across the floor. I knelt to help gather them. Birthday parties, staff picnics, Christmas mornings. Then I found one that made my hand stop. My mother stood behind the counter, younger than I had ever known her. Beside her was a thin woman with tired eyes and a gentle smile. In front of booth 7 sat a dark-haired boy holding a fork above a slice of apple pie. I turned the photograph over. Ethan looked at it, and every wall inside him seemed to fall at once. On the back, written in my mother's handwriting, were 5 words: "Evelyn and Ethan. Safe tonight." The photograph stayed between us long after the power returned, its edges curled with age, my mother's handwriting still clear on the back. Ethan held it with both hands, as though one careless movement might erase the only proof that the memory had been real. The lights hummed overhead. The refrigerator started again. Outside, the storm moved east, leaving the windows streaked with rain and the street shining beneath the restored traffic signals. Aunt Maggie took one look at Ethan's face and quietly returned to the kitchen. For once, she did not ask questions. "Your mother knew mine," I said. "She protected her," Ethan answered. His voice sounded different without the armor around it. "For almost a year. Why did you never tell me?" He looked at booth 7. "Because I did not come here expecting to find you. I did not even know whether the woman in my memories had been your mother until I saw that photograph on the first night." "You still came here to buy the building?" "Yes." "That is not the same thing as protecting it." "No, it is not." I pulled out the seat across from him. The old vinyl side beneath me. "Start at the beginning." He placed the photograph on the table. 3 years ago, Caldwell Development learned that North Star Properties was quietly acquiring purchase options along this corridor. Their plan was to assemble the block, force out the remaining businesses, and build luxury apartments. That sounds familiar. He accepted the accusation without defending himself. "I directed my company to buy the surrounding properties before North Star could complete the assembly. Then you announced your own luxury project. The board would not approve the acquisitions without a profitable redevelopment plan. So you gave them one. I gave them a proposal they would approve while trying to protect the diner inside it." His careful wording made something inside me tighten. Ethan reopened a digital copy of the agreement and scrolled to section 14. It was the same contract I had skimmed on the first night, not a different version, but the clause sat beneath pages of construction schedules, relocation terms, and financing language. "The diner would have received temporary space during construction," he said. "After completion, it would have returned under the same name and management, with a protected 30-year lease." I read the section twice. "You plan to move us into the new building?" "Yes. After tearing this one down. The structure needs substantial work. The foundation has settled unevenly, and the electrical system is decades out of date. So you decided what was best for me." I was trying to preserve what mattered. I pushed the phone back toward him. "You were preserving a name. I was preserving the diner." "No, you were preserving your memory of it." His eyes lifted to mine. I pointed toward the photographs on the wall. This place is not only booth 7. It is Walter eating meatloaf every Thursday because his wife used to make it. It is Rachel knowing she can bring Caleb here when the bus is late. It is Jerry complaining about eggs because nobody at home listens to him complain anymore. You cannot move all of that into the lobby of a luxury tower and declare it saved. The alternative was letting Northstar destroy everything. You keep offering me 2 choices, Ethan. Your plan or something worse. Because those were the choices I could see. Exactly. The choices you could see. Silence passed between us. He looked down at the photograph again, and I saw the boy he had been inside the man he had become. A frightened child sitting beneath weak fluorescent lights, learning that safety could disappear by morning. I understood him then. That did not mean I agreed with him. Your mother came here because someone allowed her to choose, I said. My mother did not buy her life and hand it back with conditions. Ethan's jaw tightened. You think I do not understand the difference? I think you are afraid of the difference. Explain that. Buying something means you believe it cannot leave. Protecting something means accepting that it still belongs to itself. The words landed hard. He leaned back, but he did not look away. What would you have done if you had known Northstar was coming, he asked. I would have told the neighborhood. They would have panicked. Maybe. Some owners would have sold immediately. Maybe. You could have lost everything. But the choice would have been ours. He remained quiet for a long time. The clock above the counter clicked past midnight. At last, he asked, What do you want? It was the first honest question he had asked me. Not what price. Not what concession. What did I want? I stood, went behind the counter, and opened the drawer where I had locked away his fountain pen. Then I pulled a yellow legal pad from beside the register and returned to the booth. A community land trust, I said. Shared ownership. Permanent protections for local businesses. Affordable apartments above the storefronts. No forced relocation. No private veto from Caldwell Development. His expression changed as I spoke. Calculation returned, but this time it was not aimed at defeating me. He was measuring the cost. That structure could reduce the projected profit by more than 60%. Then your board will hate it. They will reject it. Make them vote. They could remove me. I placed his pen on the table. Then I suppose we are about to find out whether you came here to save this place or own it. He stared at the pen. A man who had signed acquisitions worth hundreds of millions of dollars suddenly seemed unable to touch it. Then he reached forward and picked it up. You have no formal proposal, he said. I have a legal pad. No financial model. You have people who can build one. No guarantee the other owners will agree. Then we asked them. He looked at me, and something like respect settled into his face. You make impossible things sound simple. No, I make complicated things sound worth doing. His phone rang before the pen reached the paper. He glanced at the screen. Vanessa Grant. He answered. I could not hear every word, but I heard enough. Emergency board session. Delayed acquisitions. Unauthorized relocation protections. Concerns about leadership. A vote already in progress. Ethan said almost nothing. His face became still in the way it had on the first night, but now I understood that stillness was what he used when something mattered too much. He ended the call and placed the phone beside the photograph. They removed me as chief executive officer, he said. Effective immediately. Because of this proposal? Not only this. Vanessa and several board members have been preparing the vote for months. My delays on this block and the protections I inserted into your agreement gave them the excuse they needed. The diner seemed to hold its breath. What happens now? I asked. Ethan looked at the unsigned legal pad, then at the company initials engraved on the fountain pen. Slowly, he turned the pen until the letters faced downward. Now the people who intended to sell this project to Northstar from the beginning are in control. The first official notice arrived before the breakfast rush. It did not come from Caldwell Development. It came from the Philadelphia Department of Licenses and Inspections after a structural complaint had been filed before dawn. A city inspector arrived with the notice and explained that an engineering report submitted by Caldwell Development alleged an immediate occupancy concern. The city had ordered a temporary restriction beginning in 48 hours unless a licensed independent engineer could certify that the building was safe while a full review took place. Attached to the notice was the name of the company that had submitted the report, Caldwell Development Group. The contact listed beneath it was Vanessa Grant, Acting Chief Executive Officer. Aunt Maggie was pouring pancake batter onto the griddle when I read the final page. Her voice remained steady. but the metal spatula trembled in her hand. Can they close us based on a report from that company? Temporarily, Ethan said. He had spent the remaining hours of the night at booth 7, still wearing the same shirt and dark slacks. His coffee sat untouched beside the photograph of his mother. The city has to act when a licensed engineer alleges an immediate hazard. We can challenge the report, but we need another engineer and legal help quickly. How long would a full appeal take? I asked. Several weeks. Possibly longer. We have 2 days. I know. The bell above the door rang as Jerry entered for his usual eggs. Behind him came Rachel and Caleb, both shaking rain from their coats. The morning continued because mornings always did. Coffee needed pouring. Toast burned. Customers complained about the weather. Meanwhile, a city notice lay on the counter telling me that the room holding all those ordinary moments could be emptied by Friday. Ethan opened his phone. I have internal records, he said. Messages between Vanessa and North Star. Undisclosed negotiations. False financial projections. Evidence that the engineering complaint was prepared before the board removed me. How did you get them? I retained copies of records I was authorized to access while I was chief executive officer. And what are you planning to do with them? Call 3 investors. Send them enough information to turn them against Vanessa. By lunch, she will be fighting to keep her position instead of trying to close this diner. The certainty in his voice sounded familiar. It sounded like the man who had placed $1 million contract in front of me and assumed the size of the number would end the conversation. No, I said. Ethan looked up. Claire, this is not the time to protect her. I am not protecting Vanessa. Then let me stop her. You mean control her. I mean use the leverage available. That is the same language you used before. His eyes hardened. This diner could be closed in 48 hours. I read the notice. Then you understand what is at stake. Do you? I lowered my voice. Customers were beginning to notice us. You lost your position last night, and your first instinct is still to find a private weakness and force someone to obey. You want me to ask politely while they erase this place? I want you to give the records to our attorney, the city investigator, and the press. I want you to tell the truth where everyone can examine it. Truth does not guarantee victory. Neither does fear. He looked toward the windows. Rain ran down the glass in crooked lines, blurring the apartment buildings across the street. If I release everything through legal channels, I expose decisions I approved, he said. Then expose them. There could be investigations. Then answer their questions. My name will be attached to every property your neighbors lost. Also, if they intend to close this place, we are not spending our final open evening staring at paperwork. What are we doing? I asked. Feeding the neighborhood. By noon, the plan had spread farther than I expected. Jerry called the neighborhood association. Rachel posted the notice online. Lucas Reed, a local attorney and an old friend of mine, contacted a preservation group, an independent structural engineer, and 2 reporters who had been covering the redevelopment. Walter called from the hospital and promised to attend if his doctor released him. Lucas also began turning the notes on my yellow legal pad into 2 real documents. The first created the framework for a community land trust. The second was a personal commitment from Ethan. Because he no longer controlled Caldwell Development, he could not transfer company property or bind the board. What he could do was pledge his severance claim, transfer a portion of his vested shares into an independent trust, waive any personal right to control the future project, and cooperate with a court-supervised settlement. It would not save the block by itself. It would prove that he was willing to give up something real. At 6 that evening, every booth was full. Folding chairs lined the walls. Former employees brought old photographs and taped them near the register. Maggie filled the counter with meatloaf, chicken pot pie, macaroni and cheese, and 4 apple pies. A local reporter shared Rachel's live broadcast, and within an hour, thousands of people were watching. I stood behind the counter with the city notice in one hand and Ethan's silver fountain pen in the other. My heart pounded so loudly that I could barely hear Lucas introduce me. I told the truth. I told them about the offers, the pressure, the hidden protection in the contract, and the man who had tried to preserve the diner without understanding that saving people required their consent. I did not excuse Ethan. I did not condemn him. I said he had treated our neighborhood like a problem that could be solved from a boardroom. Then I turned toward booth 7. He understands that now, I said. Ethan remained seated for one long second. Then he stood. The room became quiet as he walked to the counter. No tailored jacket. No assistants. No company behind him. Only a man carrying records that could cost him whatever remained of his reputation. Caldwell Development pressured property owners on this block, he said. I approved methods that placed profit above dignity because I believed preserving part of the neighborhood justified controlling all of it. I was wrong. He did not recklessly read private documents aloud or make accusations he could not prove. Instead, he announced that authenticated copies had been delivered to Lucas, the city inspector general, the company's outside auditors, and 2 investigative reporters. He described the North Star negotiations, the timing of the engineering complaint, and his own role in the original acquisitions. Then he accepted responsibility for every decision bearing his signature. His phone rang. Vanessa. He looked at the screen, switched the phone off, and placed it on the counter. Do you have the agreement? He asked me. Lucas handed over the final document. Ethan read every page while the diner waited. Funding for the proposed trust. Independent governance. No forced relocation. No private veto. Full cooperation with any lawful investigation. When he reached the signature line, I placed the fountain pen beside him. Everyone has a number, I said. His eyes met mine. There was no anger left in them. Only recognition. Not everything, he answered. Then he signed the agreement without changing a single word. The room erupted in applause, but Ethan did not turn toward the cameras. He looked at me as though the real decision had happened long before the ink touched paper. We did not receive a miracle that night. The city did not erase the notice because a video became popular. Real life was slower than that. The independent engineer arrived at 7 the following morning and spent nearly 5 hours inspecting the foundation, electrical system, roof, and support walls. The building needed repairs, but he found no evidence of an immediate structural failure. Lucas submitted the report before the deadline, along with evidence questioning the independence of Caldwell Development's engineer. By early afternoon, the city suspended the occupancy restriction pending a formal hearing. We had not saved the diner permanently. Not yet, but we had prevented them from removing us without evidence or due process. After the inspector left and the last reporter packed away her equipment, I found Ethan sitting alone in booth 7. A warm slice of apple pie waited in front of him. He lifted the fork and took one bite. Is it how you remember? I asked. He closed his eyes for a moment. No, my chest tightened. Then he looked at me, and the smallest smile softened his face. This time, I am not waiting for someone to come back. He moved the second fork toward the empty seat across from him. This time, I am asking someone to stay. 6 months later, the bell above the diner door rang at exactly 9:15, and I knew who it was before I looked up. Some habits announced themselves without sound. Ethan stepped inside carrying nothing but rain on his shoulders. No leather folder. No fountain pen. No driver waiting at the curb. He wore a dark blue coat over a plain gray sweater, and for the first time since I had known him, he looked like a man arriving somewhere instead of a man taking possession of it. Bennett's diner had changed since the day he signed the agreement, but not in the ways people expected. The Community Land Trust had been incorporated after weeks of meetings, legal reviews, and neighborhood votes. The city approved the repair plan and a package of preservation incentives. After regulators, lenders, and outside auditors opened reviews of Caldwell Development's conduct, the company and North Star entered a negotiated settlement. Caldwell released several disputed purchase options, placed $12 million into a neighborhood preservation fund, and agreed to negotiate the transfer of key properties to the land trust under independent supervision. Ethan's personal contribution helped the trust secure additional financing. The diner received a new roof, safe wiring, and windows that no longer allowed winter air to slip between the frames. We kept the cracked tile near the register because Aunt Maggie said every respectable place needed at least one flaw. The red neon sign had been repaired, but it still flickered once before glowing steadily each night. Booth 7 remained exactly where it had always been. The initials beneath the table remained too. Ethan refused every invitation to return to Caldwell Development. He said a title offered by frightened investors was still a cage. Instead, he opened a small consulting office in 2 rooms above a bookstore. He employed 4 people, including one former Caldwell analyst who said she preferred sleeping at night. Ethan charged large companies enough to keep the office open and help neighborhoods for almost nothing. He called it a business. Aunt Maggie called it a conscience with invoices. He had been gone for 3 weeks, traveling through western Pennsylvania to help 3 family-owned businesses create a smaller version of our land trust. I stood behind the counter with a coffee pot in my hand and watched him pause near the entrance. "You are late," I said. Ethan glanced at the clock. "It is 9:15. You missed 21 nights." "You counted." "The register counts everything." The register sounds unusually judgmental. I poured coffee into his usual white mug. "Booth 7. He looked toward the back of the diner. Then he looked at the stool across from me. "Only if you were planning to sit with me." My hand stopped above the counter. 6 months earlier, that question would have sounded like a challenge. Now it sounded like what it was. A request. "I am working," I said. "I can wait." "You spent most of your life waiting for someone who was not coming back." His expression softened. "I am trying something different." I carried his coffee to booth 7. He followed, and I sat across from him while Maggie watched through the kitchen window with no attempt at discretion. Rain tapped against the glass. The evening crowd had thinned to Walter, Jerry, and Rachel, who was helping Caleb with a school project at the counter. Ordinary sounds filled the room. A spoon touching ceramic. The low hum of the refrigerator. Jerry turning newspaper pages too loudly. Once, Ethan would have commanded every room he entered. Now he seemed grateful that the room continued without him. "How was Erie?" I asked. "Cold. That is not a report. The bakery owners signed their trust agreement yesterday. They kept the building, the apartments above it, and the ovens their grandfather installed in 1974. You remembered the year. You taught me that details are people in another form." I tried not to smile. I failed. He reached into his coat, and my body tensed before I could stop it. Ethan noticed. Of course he noticed. His hand paused. "It is not a contract." That is exactly what a man carrying a contract would say. He removed a small photograph and placed it on the table. It was a restored copy of the old picture we had found during the storm. Evelyn and Ethan. Safe tonight. Beside it was another photograph, taken at the first Community Land Trust meeting. I stood behind the diner counter holding the signed agreement. Ethan stood several feet away, not beside me and not in front of me, but among the neighbors. "I found my mother," he said. The diner sound seemed to move farther away. "What?" "She lives outside Portland, Oregon. She changed her last name. She has a garden, 2 dogs, and a husband who teaches middle school science." His voice remained calm, but his fingers pressed against the edge of the table. "Did you speak to her?" "Last Sunday." "What did you say?" "At first, nothing useful." A small, embarrassed smile appeared. Then I told her I remembered the apple pie. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. His fingers turned beneath my palm, but he did not hold too tightly. He had learned that even comfort needed room to breathe. "Is she coming here?" I asked. "Next month. She wants to see the diner. She wants to meet you." "Why me?" Ethan looked at our hands. "Because I told her the truth." "Which truth?" "That I returned here to protect a memory and found someone who made me face the man I had become." The words settled between us. No audience. No camera. No applause. Just truth beneath fluorescent lights. "That sounds suspiciously rehearsed," I said. "I practiced on the train." I laughed, and the sound surprised both of us. Ethan reached into his coat again, slower this time, and placed the silver fountain pen beside the photographs. "I thought you said there was no contract." "There is not." "Then why did you bring that?" "Because it belonged to the version of me who believed a signature meant ownership." He pushed it toward me. "I think it should remain with the woman who used it to write a different ending." I picked up the pen. The metal was warm from his coat. "What are you trying to buy this time?" "Nothing." He drew a quiet breath. "I came to ask whether there is a place for me in the life you have already built." Outside, the rain softened. Behind the counter, Caleb laughed at something Rachel whispered. Walter lifted his mug toward us while pretending not to listen. I looked at Ethan Caldwell, the man who had once offered enough money to erase every problem I had, and saw someone who finally understood that removing a problem was not the same as honoring a person. "There are conditions," I said. His mouth curved. "Of course there are. You pay for your coffee." "Agreed." "You stop ordering pie unless you intend to eat it." "Reasonable." "You never make choices for me because you are afraid I might make the wrong one." His smile faded, replaced by something deeper. "Agreed." I turned my hand beneath his and laced our fingers together. "Then you can stay." He did not make a speech. He did not promise me the world. He simply sat there while the diner breathed around us. And when Maggie placed 2 slices of warm apple pie on the table, he ate every bite. Ethan had once entered my life believing everything had a price. He returned night after night until he learned that trust could not be purchased, safety could not be owned, and love was not a contract signed under pressure. He had ruled boardrooms, buildings, and people who feared disappointing him. In the end, the greatest power he ever showed was arriving with empty hands, asking permission, and listening when I answered.